A warm welcome to everyone from Excel and Excel. Hope you all are safe and doing well. Thank you all for enrolling in this event. Excel and Excel welcomes you all. For those of you who didn't know about Excel and Excel, here's a gist. Excel and Excel is a data analytics firm that solves high impact business problems using data and technology. We provide end to end services in the field of data analytics and data visualization. Our core services include analytics, consulting, and training. Excel and Excel presents the popular talk show EiEFreshTalk on its YouTube channel, where it hosts great leaders and subject matter experts in various fields from India and abroad to speak regularly on a variety of topics ranging from Excel to analytics and finance to financial modeling and many more. Some of our past events are Data Storytelling using Power BI by Pranjal Dubey, Best Practices for Data Model Size Optimization in Power BI by Nicola Eilick, Data Visualization and Insights from Power BI by CA Deepak Singh, and HR Analytics using Power BI by Bhanu Kumar. We are happy to share our website EIE Fresh Talk by Excel and Excel has been selected as one of the top 5 Microsoft Excel podcasts on the web by feedspot.com. We are also happy to share the first ever annual gathering of Microsoft Excel Global Community, which is planned from 6th to 9th February 2021, the Global Excel Summit, a 4-day event with 17 plus speakers and 1,000 plus attendees. Learn from the top excellent practitioners in the world, connect with people in all lines of business, and last but not the least, excel with masterclasses. We are proud to share that Excel and Excel is associated as a media partner for the Global Excel Summit. Use the promo code Excel and Excel and get special prices on various products and courses. Joining us today, we have our speaker for the day, Mr. Nidhal Firoze. Mr. Nidhal Firoze works as a data analytics, BI consultant, speaker, mentor, and a practitioner residing in Mumbai. His areas of expertise include email etiquette, business etiquette, Skype etiquette, and communication etiquette. He has work experiences as an associate manager, BI and digital analytics, and as an associate trainer, aptitude. He is technically skilled at Tableau, Power BI, Google Data Studio, MDS Excel, and PowerPoint. He is also a certified web analyst and Google certified professional, seasoned corporate trainer, experienced aptitude and JDPI trainer, and has trained 2,000 plus students from 20 plus colleges. He has also taken seminars, webinars on analytics, and is well versed in visualization and analytics tool, including Adobe Analytics and Google Analytics. We welcome you, sir. It's a pleasure having you with us. Before we begin, I request participants to join me in welcoming today's speaker with a hi in the chat section. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box. We will later present it to the speaker. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Alinda, for that warm welcome. I really appreciate all the kind words you said, and it's really great to be on this forum, or rather on this podcast, on this live session by Excel in Excel. I've heard a lot about Excel in Excel from before. I've been following Excel in Excel for a while now, and it's really a great opportunity for me to be on the other side of this platform, right? So happy to get started. Shall I go ahead and share my screen? Could you please confirm, Alinda? I think you're on mute. Okay. I've started sharing my screen. So can you please confirm if you're able to hear me, see me, as well as see my screen?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We're good.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So let's get started. Welcome everyone to this session. I'm going to be talking about storytelling through visualization. Storytelling is one of the skill sets that's very high in demand today. There is a lot of focus from typical dashboarding and insight generation to narrating stories, because stories are something that people will always remember. So there is that new focus on storytelling as a skill, and it is very essential that you need to have it, right, in case you want to excel in your career as well. So I'm going to be using some examples, some approaches and techniques to tell your stories better through data visualization. Before we get started about the crux of this topic, I'm going to tell you guys a quick story of my life so far. So here's the story of my life in summary. I am an engineering graduate from SEMS School of Engineering and Technology, and post that I did a short stint as an aptitude trainer. That's when I got a chance to actually interact with a lot of students, colleges, and be on the speaking side of the podium, right? And I really enjoyed doing it, because that you always gave me the thrills, because I've had experiences where helping somebody to learn something quickly is always giving me like a good feeling about it, right? I did an MBA in marketing from Nirma University Institute of Management, and during my summer internship, I interned at a media agency called Gozup, based out of Mumbai for 2 months. I joined Coast 5 Intelligence, formerly known as Blue Ocean Market Intelligence, as a senior analyst, and a couple of years later, I got promoted to an associate manager, PI and digital analytics. So these are my two strong domains: business intelligence and digital or web analytics. And recently, I also got promoted as a manager. So currently, I'm a manager in BI and digital analytics with Coast 5 Intelligence. And I've worked with these brands and organizations as a consultant, speaker, and mentor. And this is my first collaboration with Excel in Excel, and I'm really happy to do this. So that's a quick short story about my journey so far. Let me walk you through some really interesting stats about data visualization and storytelling. So 90% of the information that get transmitted to the human brain is visual. So if you are presented with visual representation as well as textual representation, in most cases, you will tend to remember the visual representations or the images more than the text that is being thrown at you, right? So if somebody is giving you a lot of numbers, you'd still have, your memory retention will also be more towards the images or the visuals that you saw. Human brains can process visuals 60,000 times faster. So that's really quick, right? When somebody's showing you an image, and obviously if that image is like well designed and it has like, the proper story points in that image, the message comes across pretty quickly, and you don't need to kind of read anything to understand, because, reading takes more effort. If you're reading something, you need to understand it, you need to process it, and then you get the magnitude of it. But when you look at a visual, it'll instantly communicate across, the key point, like this image that I've used here, which is a good example of what I'm talking about, right? The speed at which this data is being processed. When you use high quality infographics, it's 30 times more likely to be read than plain text. So when I'm giving you these colored boxes with these infographics, people will, have a tendency to look at those color representations, or, those infographics, rather than just the plain text. A Wharton School of Business study found that if you use data visualizations in your meetings, the meeting time can be shortened by up to 24%. And that's a really good thing to have, right? Especially for those of you who are working in this era, right? In the digital era, where everybody is now doing virtual meetings instead of physical meetings. Now, because you're working from home, you have to have more meetings, because earlier you just need to ask your colleague who's sitting right beside you, you'll get an answer also instantly. But right now you need to do more meetings. But what if you could shorten those meetings with the use of data representations in the form of visualizations and dashboards or stories, right? That's going to cost, that's going to cost you savings. That's going to give you savings in terms of time. So you can shorten your meetings, which is really a good thing. Due to all of these reasons and a lot more, data visualization definitely matters, and it's a skill that you need to have, especially when you are expected to communicate insights across to your business stakeholders or your clients or your senior managers, right? Let's now look at what are some of the reasons why visualization is needed, right? First off, the ease of representation and consumption is very, very, very much present when you're using visualization. So when you want to represent something, it's easier for you to represent it using visualization. And even for people who want to consume that data, it's much easier for them to consume it when it's represented through like a graph, a bar chart, or a pie chart, right? The memory retention gets increased, and I already spoke about this earlier. When somebody looks at a visual, now you can take an example of a newspaper which is showing a huge pie chart in the first front page itself, which is telling you that 90% of the people have already, I don't know, taken vaccination doses, right? I'm just giving you a random example here, random stat here, but you get the point, right? When you see that visual, that takes up, that gets fast processed by your brain, and you tend to remember that for a longer period rather than when you just read a headline. When you use a visualization, you get a summarized view, or a bird's eye view, as I may call it, which will tell you which are the top 10 items, or the top 10 geographies, or top 10 markets, or the top 10 products, or the bottom 10, or any focus area that you want to look at. And it will give you, like, from high up above, if you look at the entire business or the entire data set that you have, these are the ones that are like kind of standing out within the entire data set. You're able to identify anomalies, anything that does not seem to be normal, and you need to investigate that further. You're able to identify with the use of visualizations. Self-service BI is a very highly used term today. Everybody wants to do self-service BI. Now, if you are wondering what is self-service BI, typically in an organization, you would have to, I'm talking about back in the 2010s or 2000s, you'd have to reach out to somebody from the IT team and ask them that, I need such and such data for the past 3 weeks, and I need it with this particular kind of specifications, right? I want to look at the sales of my products in just the southern Indian states, but nothing more than that. And I want to look at only specific set of products, just the t-shirts and the jeans, for example, if I'm a retail dress store. And then what would happen is the IT guy would fetch you all of that data, and then you are realizing that there was a specific kind of cut that needed to be applied to that data. So it's not exactly what you need. Now you have to go back, send another email, or talk to that person again and ask them, that's not exactly what I'm looking for. I need something else as well. And he comes back with another version of it, which takes, probably this whole thing could take upwards of 15 to 20 days or 30 days even, depending on how much workload that IT guy has, and depending on what priority, what number on his priority list does your request stand. So with all of these factors in consideration, you will have to depend on somebody else for getting the data that you need. But that's very inconvenient, right? These days, due to tools like Tableau and Power BI, you have to, you have self-service as an option, which means you can get the type of data that you need by just going into a dashboard and doing self-service, and then getting an extract of that data. Like, you can even download it as an Excel or a CSV file, and then do your own set of analysis on that. So that's what is called a self-service BI, and that's also enabled. You also get speed to insights. Now, this is very important, especially in today's world. Any insight that you are supposed to get today, if you are getting it 2 days after, then there's an impact because of that. You're not able to make or take the right decision because you did not get access to that insight. So you need real-time data sometimes, because, for example, I take the case of a big billion days sale. A Flipkart or an Amazon will always need the real-time insights while that sale period is on, to understand that, is there something going drastically wrong? Is there a set of product pages on Amazon.in that are not really, not performing well, or, giving a 404 error, or, some kind of issue? They need to get that insight really quickly so that they can take the, action and then fix that, thereby, using that opportunity and not losing that opportunity, right? So that's about some of the reasons why you need data visualization. If I were to picture data visualization as an assembly line, these would be the set of steps that you would normally take to kind of build your visual and share your insights. So first off, you would always have to start asking the right questions. Now, if you are not the person who is asking the right questions, it has to be the person who is, consuming that data. They'll have to figure out, what are the questions that they are trying to answer by using the data. There's a conventional approach of, collect all the data that I can, and then, we'll figure out what to do with it later. But that's not a good approach. It's always should be driven by these asking the right questions. Once you ask the right questions, you figure out what's the data you want to collect. You start collecting that data, and then once you have collected that data, then you would obviously have to, use that data, process it, and then, show it in the form of a visual, and then answer some questions out of it, right? So that those questions are very important. These should make sense from a business perspective. The next thing to do is obviously check whether, for answering these questions, do I have the data points available? Then I need to start, a process for collecting that data. So these are the particular data points that I need to answer my questions. So I'll start collecting my data, and I'll figure out ways to do it. The next thing to do would be, like, the 80% of the time gets consumed in this particular process, which is the cleaning or transformation. There are different terms for it. People call it ETL, people call it data engineering. All of this is more or less the same. There's very common areas in all of those, but what you're doing is processing your data before you start working on it and before you start using it to build your dashboards. Next, you need to also choose, how am I going to show the data now that I've cleaned it? Now I've removed all the, null values or the outliers from my initial data set. I want to, display it to somebody who is interested in seeing it. And how will I show that data? So you have to decide how you're going to do it. This is where your wireframes or your dummy, whiteboard sketches will come into the picture, and you will start putting in like a layout of how you're going to display that data. And then you can start creating those charts and creating the views or the sheets in Tableau, if I'm looking at it as an example. And then the next thing to do is, combine all of those charts, put it into like a good, well-designed dashboard, and then publish that dashboard. And finally, one of the very important piece here, which is the last mile of analytics, is, analyzing the data and finding the insights. People are always very much focused on, creating 5 dashboards or 10 dashboards. Now, the number of dashboards that you create is not going to determine how fast or how much you're going to progress. It's always how much value you're driving out of the existing dashboards. Even if it is 1 or 2 of them, you need to start using those dashboards to start, drive value out of that. And if you want to drive value, you need to spend time with that data and find the right insights, right? So insights really matter, and that will take you to the last mile, and that will actually justify all of the investment that you have made in setting up those dashboards, right? Even if it is time investment or money investment or any other kind of investment. Yeah, I want to take a quick pause here and check if, all of the audio is coming through clearly. So if somebody from the hosts could kindly confirm if everything is well so far, that'll be just like a quick health check.
So everything is going on good.
Okay, great, perfect. Let's hope it stays that way till the end. But yeah, thank you for confirming that. Okay, now let's look at what are some of the use cases for dashboards, some of the quick ones. Measuring key performance indicators is one of the use cases for dashboards. So KPIs are those custom or specific business metrics that will tell you your organization or your business is really doing well or not. So you need to have those numbers, those calculated metrics, measured, so that you're able to see at any point in time, am I doing well or not? You can analyze the trends. So this is always a very good suggestion that I always share with people who are looking for, I have a lot of data. How do I find insights from that data? Did you try looking at that data point over time and see if, from last year or from the past couple of years, has anything changed? Is there a seasonality that you're observing that, there is usually good amount of profits during certain months? Is it because of some kind of seasonality? For example, you would tend to see higher sales volume for umbrellas when there is rainy season, right? That's seasonality. Are you able to observe similar such trends from your data? Are you able to see if compared to last year, have you made progress this year? So all of these are questions, relevant questions, which will tell you, okay, this is what I've been able to achieve compared to what I did last year. And this is what I should target for my next year, right? And being able to forecast that. You can make decisions. Now I've worked with clients myself where if they don't get the data that they need to take a decision, they go, they'll start getting tensed about it, because in an organization that's very mature and depends on certain data sets for taking their day-to-day decisions, they can't do their daily operations without getting that dose of data. So they'll always need their dashboards refreshed. It needs to have accurate data and everything, so because they're depending on that for making the right decisions. So data driven decision making is something you should always focus on, rather than taking a decision based on hunch. I think this one, this is the right decision to make just because from experience or from some other bias. Rather than doing that, it's always better to take a data driven decision. You can also set up monitoring and alerts. If sales goes below or above a particular point, you can set an automated alert, which will give you insight on there's something really wrong or there's something really good. You need to look into it and understand what's the reason for that, right? So you can set up that kind of monitoring and alerts. These are some of the use cases why you can use dashboards. But end of the day, every dashboard that you're creating should have a good story to tell. Now, how do you tell stories using dashboard? A lot of people talk about telling stories through dashboards, and I'm going to have a good use case towards the end of the session where I'll be demonstrating using an actual Tableau dashboard how you can, tell a better story. So if you are an author of a book, you'll think about, what's the best thing that I can write about. You'll think about, okay, who's going to be reading my books? What do I know really well for me to write something about it? And those kind of questions. But if you're an analyst, you need to think about, I have these data sets. I have this person who has sent me an email asking for some kind of insights from this data set. What story am I going to tell him? Now, that story is going to depend on a lot of factors, right? Which is what we are going to talk about. So now we will go into the crux of this entire talk, which is how are you going to tell stories better through the use of data visualization. So let's look at the basic steps for telling a story. Number one, you need to always understand the context and the audience. And trust me, there's nothing more important than this. Understanding the context of how you are telling a story is always going to matter. Now think about it. If there's a different type of audience which has probably younger crowd, then you tend to talk about things that will, and that will be interesting for the younger crowd, like social media, for example, right? If there's a more senior audience, then you need to obviously change up the points in your story so that it is more interesting for them. So understanding the audience, who is that end person going to be, what is their daily responsibilities, is this insight going to be useful for them? I have had experiences where I created really good looking presentation decks with a lot of charts and stories and everything, and I shared it with my client. And then my client comes back and asks me, all of this is good to know, it's good information, but what will I do with it, right? How can I take action based on this insight that you're sharing with me? So then I went back and I started asking myself this question. He's asking a really good question, right? All of this is good to know. I mean, it's good to know that these are your top 10 products, but what about it, right? How can he take more action based on that? So then I started going back and thinking, any insight that I'm sharing with my client, I need to also add to it a piece of recommendation or something that will tell him, based on this insight, this is the action that you should take. So your insights should always be actionable. And if you want to make your insights actionable, you need to understand your audience. You need to understand what type of action do they usually perform in their day-to-day life, right? Without understanding that, you will not be prescribing the right insight for them. So I like to call it prescription. Like a person who's coming to an analyst is like a patient who's coming to a doctor. The doctor will now look at the symptoms of what is the condition. That's similar to an analyst looking at the data points and trying to investigate, okay, what am I trying to find out here? And then, like the doctor is prescribing the medicine for that particular condition, the analyst will have to prescribe certain recommendations or insights, which is going to tell that particular patient or that stakeholder that this is the next steps you should do to correct your course. You're already going wrong somewhere. This is what you need to do. And these are what I found out based on my 2 to 3 hours of understanding and analyzing this data, right? So let's look at a quick example here. I have two sets of dashboards here. One is an executive dashboard, another one is an operational dashboard. Now, if your audience is somebody like the CMO or the CTO or the CFO or whoever CXO it is, right? Those folks will not have a lot of time to look at specific details. They want to look at the bottom line numbers and see if, are we headed in the right direction? Because these are people who are like, very strategic. They want to look at my next 4 years or next 5 years. They want to always think from the long term. They want to look at the overall numbers and the overall health rather than, individually at a product level or at a location level. So this is a KPI dashboard, which there are 8 KPIs in here. If you can see, these are all key performance indicators for that particular business. And you can see for an executive, this is going to be really easy to understand because, it's color coded for one. And anything that's blue says that, it's doing well. And anything that's red is saying that, there's something wrong there, right? For example, total profit. The second one here is total profit, right? Total profit is something that is above, below the target of 6,000, but so the target hasn't been achieved and that's why it's in red, right? So that's something alarming. Now, I did not meet my target. Why did that happen? So I can now drill down and ask my, if I'm the CMO, I can ask my juniors, right? About why did it go below the target value of $6,000, right? If you're wondering, cost is above 25,000, but it's still in red. It's because the target is not supposed to be crossed, because increasing cost is not a good thing, right? You need to have the cost below the target of $25,000, right? So the point that I'm trying to make is, this is a good example of how you can actually have a target value versus the actual value. And you're also able to see whether it met that or not. You're also able to see the trend to see if something's going from low to high or high to low. And you're also able to see week over week, compared to my previous week, what's the percentage that has increased or decreased, right? So this is a type of audience that I would show to my executive or a senior member who does not have time to look at specifics like this, right? Now, these are specifics that I would show to a person who's at an operational level, who need to take day-to-day operational decisions and not a strategic long-term decision. And that person will need to know at a particular order level or at a product level to see, which ones are doing well, and which are the, maybe the orders, or which are the product types that I need to replenish more in my warehouse, or understand the trends and seasonality and everything, and try to also report some of that back to his seniors, right? There are just a couple of KPIs, but then you can see most of it is, at an order or at a product level detail, right? Not at an order level detail, but I think most of these are from either a product detail or at a product type detail, right? But you get the idea. This is not for somebody like an executive. This is for somebody who's at an operational level, right? So that's the difference in context and audience. Based on who is going to consume your dashboard, you need to ask those questions. If you're not aware who you're creating the dashboard for, ask them and find out, and then create your dashboard in such a way so that it's going to make sense for them. The second thing I'm going to talk about is choose the right chart for your story. Now, this is a tricky part, right? A lot of people face a challenge that, at what time do I use which chart, right? For which data. There are a lot of chart choice guides out there, which is going to help you. But, couple of quick recommendations that I can make. One is, obviously, do not always try to go for a very complex, fancy looking chart like a Sankey diagram, which is very common these days. But don't use that kind of a chart in a professional setting where most people understand bar graphs, pie charts, or line charts very easily, right? These are very easy to read and understand. That's why 90% of your use cases, you are able to use these simple charts, right? But if there is a complex use case, and if you want to show something complex, then you can look at different other types of charts. And this also comes with experience to understand which chart to use in which scenarios. Now, Tableau has a feature which shows, based on what you have selected from your data points, you're able to see the recommended charts in the Show Me tab at the right on Tableau, right? You're able to see that. By the way, if any of you are having any questions at any point, please do put that in the chat or in the box where you can, add the questions. We will be addressing all the questions towards the end of the session. The next thing I want to tell you guys is always try to avoid the noise within your dashboard. Now, when I say noise, anything that is not adding to your data story should be removed immediately from the dashboard. So try to keep less and not more. So why less? Anything that is not adding value, or that is like redundant, or it's just there for appearance, right? Don't keep those things, like the extra grid lines which are not needed. Sometimes you can remove that and just show the absolute minimum, so that it becomes easy for somebody to see. Now, for example, I've been through data presentations where people show like tens and hundreds of excel sheet rows in a PowerPoint slide. What's the point of showing all of that data? Now people get overwhelmed with all of that data. They're not able to understand what's the key point that somebody's talking about. So I would rather show only the columns that would make sense, and just use certain highlighting colors to show, these are the ones that you should look at, right? So that's where avoiding the noise is very important. I can give you a quick example. This is one of my favorite examples. This is from the New Yorker magazine, by a journalist. He created this visual about New York's noisiest neighborhoods. Now, this is a good data story. Why? Because it does not have any noise. Even though this dashboard is about noise, it doesn't have any noise. When I say it doesn't have any noise, I'm talking about the labels for each of these smaller areas, right? You don't need those labels if the target audience is somebody from New York, right? They would understand. Like, for example, if you're showing it to the administrative body in New York, the city of New York, then they wouldn't need a label for it, right? They'd be able to understand which are the ones that are shaded the most, right? And the ones that have a darker shade of blue are the ones that have the noise, more noise in that neighborhood, right? It's very simple. And what noise are we talking about here? Ice cream trucks. So these are areas where they're getting higher number of complaints from ice cream truck noise, right? So that's a very simple visual. There's no additional imagine if for each of these states that are shaded, if he used a different shade of color for each of these, like a different color altogether, right? That would become too messy. So I also recommend this to people. Try to keep minimal number of colors, but try to use different shades of the same color, which will give you insight there itself, that the darker one is obviously perceived to be the one which has higher amount of quantity, right? And another thing I liked about this visual and the way he presented it was the fact that he used a starting storyline which said, there are two types of noise in New York. The first is the noise of the city, which is the hustle bustle and the vehicles, the ice cream trucks, the people moving around and everything. And the second is people complaining about the noise in New York. That's the second type of noise. And he used that like an interesting hook to his story, which will instantly grab the attention of the people and, make them read more about it, right? So these are some things about a story that makes it different. Even when you are presenting a story to your customers or your clients or your managers, you should have a hook like that, which is going to instantly hook and capture their attention, so that people will be listening to what you are saying, right? The next thing I would recommend is to use pre-attentive attributes. Now, if that sounds too confusing, I'm going to make that simpler, right? When you look at this image, there's something in here that is striking you immediately, right? If you look at this image, there's that piece at the exact center of this image that has all of the focus. It is the odd one out in this case, right? Because it's a different color and it's not in its place. This is exactly what I'm talking about when I say pre-attentive attribute. Even within your charts or dashboards, use these set of, like, in this case, it's the color that's completely differentiating it from the others. Use these attributes to differentiate your data points, so that, I don't need to show this image and ask you all to focus on the piece at the center. I don't need to tell you specifically focus on the piece at center. Everybody will start looking at it immediately because it's already focused within the image. The same principle applies to your visuals also. If you're showing a visual to somebody, you don't need to tell them, look at the column that's on the right or the right, wherever it is. You can just highlight it using some of these attributes. So let's look at what are some of these attributes. There are 4 pre-attentive attributes based on what Colin Ware wrote in his book called, Visualization Perception for Design. One is color, second is form, third is movement, and fourth is spatial positioning. Now let's talk about these in a bit more of detail. Uh, there are these squares, three squares that are completely different from the ones that you see otherwise, right? You're able to talk, I don't need to have a mouse pointer and show you which are the three squares I'm talking about. It's already visible very clearly to you, right? This is basically the hue or the color that has been changed to kind of show it differently, right? The second thing I can do, again, this again falls into color, which is the intensity, right? The intensity of the color, which is, the darker the shade of color. Now, if I'm telling you to focus on three squares on this in this visual, you don't need to, ask me which three squares are you talking about. Again, the same thing. I changed the intensity of the color and, kept some of them darker. So if I'm showing this to somebody, instantly, they will also look at those three same squares that I'm talking about. The next thing you can do is, form. Under form, there is orientation. So if you are able to change the orientation to, somewhat of a tilt, you're able to notice those, those four bars that I'm talking about, which four bars that I'm talking about, right? Curvature is another thing that you can do, and, add a bit of curves. Length, this is typically what you see in a bar chart or a column chart, right? The bars will have different lengths within the bar chart, and that's what's telling you which is the one that has the highest value and the one that has the lowest value. Width is something you can do. Again, this is not a good practice from a design standpoint to have a lot of width differentiation, but sometimes width can also be used as an attribute to differentiate your data element within a dashboard. Enclosure is another option. Obviously, when you're taking a screenshot and sharing something, you can put that in a box to focus on, this is the area that I'm talking about, right? You can use an enclosure. You can add certain marks like a cross mark or a check mark to talk about, which are the ones that you're talking about. There are certain shapes here that are different from the majority of them, which are circles, right? There are four circles in this visual, and you're easily able to count which are the four circles, right? Because they are a different shape, they are standing out, and your brain can immediately process it without having to read an instruction which says, there are four different shapes in it, right? That's the whole point. Try to make it as easy for the brain to comprehend for the end user, so that you don't need to give a separate instruction booklet along with your dashboard, right? Size is another thing that is differentiating, obviously, which is what you're aware of. The next thing is motion. So you can see that there are these moving blocks, right? Which is going to have that differentiation. Now, I wouldn't recommend using a lot of movement in your dashboard, because, for example, if there are four charts in your dashboard, one at the top right is, constantly moving, it's going to create a distraction for, when you're trying to focus on the bottom left one, the top one is going to constantly move and it's going to distract you. So you don't, it's not recommended to have motion a lot. Now, if you look at news channels, they have these flash or breaking news at the bottom, which is something that keeps moving. And why does it keep moving? It wants to grab your attention so that you don't switch the channel and go somewhere else, right? They get more TRP. The 2D position is something like you would see in like a scatter plot, right? The two-dimensional position in the X and Y coordinate space is also determining or telling something about, your data point. So these are some pre-attentive attributes: size, color, form, and spatial positioning. These are some of the things that can kind of, differentiate your data elements. Try to use this as much as you can, and just to accentuate your story, just so that you don't need to call out, that this is something that you have to look at. People will automatically look at what you're showing them, right? The next thing to do, and this should be a lower priority, because why do I say that this is a lower priority? Everybody tends to focus on design first. Like, everybody wants to make things look very good, visually appealing. But that should be a second priority. The first priority should always be the understandability or the readability of the dashboard. Something that you are displaying should be easily understandable and readable to somebody. Then the second priority should be design, right? Design is obviously a good thing to have. If you include design also, some of the best practices from design also, then your dashboards are going to look better, and also they'll be readable better, right? So I have a few best practices listed here for the different types of charts. Now, some of the common charts, like the bar chart, right? I'm going to show you the example for a bar chart. Always use horizontal labels when you are using a bar chart. So people have a tendency, and I've seen this in dashboards as well as in PowerPoint presentations. People have a tendency to have like a vertical label just because they don't have the space to fit it in. But what I would recommend normally is, summarize it to something like, just for Jan, Feb, March, you can just keep it like JFM. That's also understandable if the title of the chart says, this is something that's showing by month, right? How hard is it for somebody to figure out by looking at, the abbreviated form of it, right? So try to reduce the labeling, and also when you are including the labeling, don't make somebody tilt their head to look at something on your visual and make it more difficult for them to read it. Always make it simpler for them to read it, right? This is a good design practice. It's ideally recommended that the space between the bars should be at least half of the width of the bar, right? Now, this normally in tools like Tableau and Power BI, you don't have to set it up custom. It's by default, adhered to, so you don't need to change that manually. But it's always good to see if is it already fitting that condition or not. It's preferred to start the y-axis value at 0, because I have a good example here as well. So if I look at this example, I can see that. Let me use a pointer, right? If I look at this as an example, this is a good and accurate representation. But if I look at these two bars, it's giving me the impression that the second bar is, double the size of the first one, which is giving me an a reading that, this value is actually double that of this one. But in fact, the axis is starting at 50 and it's just, 1 unit apart, right? So that's throwing me off, and that's giving me the wrong representation. Do not ever give the wrong representation of data, because people will get the data points incorrectly. So always prefer to use the y-axis, start at 0. Use consistent colors, right? Always try to keep the colors minimal. I spoke about this earlier also. When you use different colors for each of the bars, and if you have like 10 different bars, that's going to be too many colors, and that's going to divert the focus and attention of your end user or your reader. Always better to order the data appropriately. So if you are keeping it in a sensible format, like alphabetically or based on value, I would prefer to use it by value, because a bar chart as a best practice should always be sorted by size. The largest bar should show at the beginning, followed by the second largest bar, and so on and so forth, unless you are doing it by month, right? In that case, it doesn't make sense, because if you're doing it by month, first thing, try to use a line chart instead of a bar chart, because for anything that is where you're showing the trend in time, it's better to use a line chart. But if you're still using a bar, then obviously you can't sort it by value, because you have to see Feb after Jan, and you can't see it in a random order, right? Wouldn't make sense. Let's look at now best practices for a pie chart. Do not ever visualize more than 5 categories per chart. Now my preference is 4. I wouldn't even go for 5. When there are too many slices in a pie, like the one on the left, it becomes very, very dirty, clunky, and it's not giving a clear picture, right? Try to club and put together the lower section of values as something called as others, because obviously in a pie chart, your interest is more on which is the larger segments, right? Your bottom 5 is not what you normally use for a you normally consume from a pie chart. It's always mostly the larger chunks that you want to focus on. So club the smaller ones into something called as others. And again, do not use too many different colors. If possible, try to use different shades of the same color, right? So that's about more than 5 categories. Do not use multiple pie charts for comparison. Because of the angle at which the different segments of the pie are present, it's going to be difficult to compare this orange segment here with this orange segment here, right? It's easier to compare when I have a stacked bar chart to see, I can see the size comparison. I can do it better when I have a stacked bar chart. So don't use 3 to 4 pie charts. I've seen people doing it. Every time I've seen it, I've already, I try telling those people that, it's better to avoid using 4 to 5 pie charts side by side to compare, keep it like a stacked bar chart, or use a pie chart for just one pie chart for the overall visual, right? And then if you want to break it down, do it some other way. Make sure all of the data adds up to 100%. So pie chart is always used for, part to whole representation. So what portion of 100 percentage something, a particular category is what you would like to see in a pie chart. So it always has to add up to 100 percentage. It can't be more than that. And try to order the slices accurately. There are a couple of ways shown here. My preference is the second one, which is this, which is where you have the largest pie first, the second largest, and third largest, and so on, right? Some of the tools will already have by default this in place, but if it is not in place, you should put that in place because that makes it more readable. And I don't need the labels here to understand that 2 is smaller than 1, right? I mean, 2, the value of this 2 segment is less than 1 because it's already sorted by size. Otherwise, I'd have to look at, both of these look actually similar, which one is larger or not, right? So always sort it by size. Let's look at line chart. Try to include a zero baseline if possible, right? We spoke about this earlier also. Have a zero baseline. Do not plot more than 4 lines. Whenever you have like more than 4 lines, try to split it into multiple charts if needed, right? Because that's going to be too much to look at, and it's not giving you a clear story. But when you have like 2 things that are more connected into one line chart, it's easy to compare between those 2 lines, right? So try to split it out. That is always going to be better. Use solid lines better than dashed or dotted lines. Try to keep it only solid lines. If possible, wherever it's possible, try to label the lines directly rather than having a separate legend for the labels. It is going to, people don't have to look it up. See, okay, orange is for oranges, right? They don't have to look it up separately. They're able to read it better, and reduce the cognitive load on their brain. Always use the right height. When the axis values are not in the perfect form, then it's going to give you a lot of empty space here, and the trends are not really clearly visible. But in most tools, this is automatically set up by the tool itself based on what's the highest value of that variable you are plotting. It will by default set up the axis that way. So you don't need to worry about it manually usually, but just in case that's not followed, you need to adjust it, right? The last one is the scatter plot. So in which case would you use a scatter plot? When you want to look at relationship between 2 different variables or measures or metrics, right? That's where you use a scatter plot. You always have to again start the y-axis at 0. Use size and color to encode additional variables, right? So you have an x coordinate and a y coordinate. You're using 2 metric values there. You can also add like a third dimension to it, which is the size of that bubble or that dot. The size is going to give you a third dimension, and you can also use like the color or the shading of the color to tell you a 4th dimension, right? So you can add more variables into it that way. You can also use or add those trend lines, which is going to tell you overall this is where the trend lines are. And don't compare more than 2 lines. This is the same principle we spoke about in a line chart, right? So all of these elements, try to stitch these together, and you should narrate a very compelling story, something that is going to, catch them by surprise or, hook their attention. You need to have something like that in your dashboards. So here's an example from Tableau, which is a story feature in Tableau, right? I don't know how many of you have heard about it or seen that feature being used in Tableau, but there's a feature like, just how I'm doing this presentation, I'm keeping on switching from slide to slide. Similarly, in Tableau also, you have a feature called as story, which you can use to, narrate in a particular order. Okay, we're going to talk about this a bit more. I'm going to show you an actual story that I have open on the side from Tableau. Let's look at this as an example, right? This is a visual that's telling a very clear picture. It has minimum, grid lines and everything. It's just a line which is telling you that, after a particular point, it has started going way above the average. And this is basically talking about global warming. Now all of the politicians and everybody is, most of the influential people in the world, they're reluctant to accept the fact that global warming is actually increasing, is on a rise. But this is telling a clear picture and showing proof that global warming is indeed a problem, and after a particular time, that's when it started increasing more than what would be your normal or an average scale, right? Here's another good visual that I have, which is, a good representation of, you don't need an Excel sheet to tell or show people the magnitude of this problem, right? And the problem here is the amount of plastic that's being, you know that's actually, the city is actually drowning in plastic. So the heap that of plastic that you can see here, and this is a snapshot from one of the cities in the world, New York, which has some of the tallest buildings in the world, right? And even with those tallest buildings, you can see the amount of plastic, it's becoming like a huge hill. And this itself tells you the problem is very huge, right? So that entire city is drowning in plastic, right? So you don't need three to four paragraphs to tell the magnitude of the story. You just need a single image, and it's telling you how much of a big problem you are in. This is another good example I like, and I quote all the time. This is not recommended obviously for a professional kind of a setting, right, in an actual workplace. But I really loved the fact that there are no charts used here at all, because the data is about cigarettes and cigarette consumption. They've used an actual cigarette box instead of a bar chart, right? And the size of each of those cigarettes is actually depicting the size of the bar or the value that they are trying to show, right? So it's a very creative representation, probably something I wouldn't use in a professional setting, but it is telling the story in a very brilliant and creative fashion without a lot of information. This is back from 1854 by a guy named Jon Snow. Not the same Jon Snow from Game of Thrones, but this is a version of, cholera outbreak in London. And even before people had tools like Tableau or Power BI, this person actually used data about cholera cases in Broad Street in London, and he started mapping the cases on an actual map of the place. And he started you see these black bricks, right? These are all marks that indicate from where the cases were reported. Now when he started plotting this on this visual, he started noticing this area at the center, which is close to Broad Street, where there's a huge number of cases in this area. And now, as you may probably know, cholera is a disease that's caused by, contaminated water and things like that. You can see there's a pump here at the center, there's a water pump here. When they actually looked at this map visual, they figured that, there's something that needs to be investigated. They checked the pump, water in the pump in that central area, and they found that the place from where it was pumping water, it was contaminated by sewage water, right? And that was the reason why cholera was, getting spread. And this visualization helped them determine the root cause of a disease that was spreading in large numbers. So imagine the power of how, visualizations can also bring in social change and also help you take the right decisions and, take the right actions. With that, we kind of wind up. What I'll do is I'll quickly walk you guys through story feature within Tableau. So just a second. Can somebody from the host team confirm if you're able to see the Tableau screen? I'll repeat that. Are you able to see the Tableau screen? Can someone please confirm?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's visible.
Okay, great. Do we have any questions so far? Just curious.
Yes, sir. We do have a couple of them.
Okay. So anybody who has more questions, feel free to think about those questions and put it in those respective chat windows. Happy to address any number of questions, as much as time permits. So please do put your questions there. Till then, I'll quickly walk you guys through the story feature within Tableau. So I'm going to open this up. So as you can see, this is a story within Tableau. So you can see there are different sheets here. These are all dashboards, but this is a feature called as story, which is very rarely used, to be honest, right? People haven't found the value this can bring actually. Now, when would you use a story feature in Tableau? One is when you want to narrate and tell the story from a very, very generic or a high level stats to, drive people to the lower level or the specific details, right? So this is a story about, earthquakes. And the question that's being asked here is a thought provoking question. It's are big earthquakes on the rise, right? So that's the question being asked. And you can see every story piece has a caption here. So the caption for this visual that you're seeing is thousands of earthquakes are recorded every year, right? And you're able to customize it to see and look at, different cuts of this data. I'm able to look at, EMEA or APAC or North and South America, right? And I'm able to see that, there's a legend that's being followed, which is green to red. So anything that's in the greens, that is, a minimum of 6 or a minimum of, I think, a 4 magnitude, but I think the values is actually close to 6, right? That's why anything that's closer to 8 is a red one, right? Like these ones. So this is the one that was one of the largest earthquakes, right? With a magnitude of 9.1 on the west coast of northern Sumatra. There's another one, I think, close to, yeah, there are more actually, in Fiji, Japan, lot more in Asia, and in this like this one in the South America, right? But you get the idea. All the smaller circles which are green, these are the ones that have like lower magnitude, right? But there are these ones, these are like the hot zone where there's a lot more earthquakes than this area in the Europe, right? There's very, very less ones in the Europe. So you're able to get these quick level stats at the beginning itself, right? The best part is now I can walk you through, something that's a more precise cut of this data. Now I don't see those green boxes anymore. Now I'm only seeing the ones that have like, a magnitude of 7 to 9.1. So now I'm focusing in on, okay, out of over 130,000 earthquakes, only 174. You see how small a percentage of this large number it is when you have only 174 that were a magnitude of 7 or greater, right? And it's a good thing that obviously it's a small percentage, because obviously every earthquake has cost us a lot in terms of lives and damage and everything, right? But you get the idea. This is the key insight here. You see the Pacific Ring of Fire. This is what they call it, right? This ring here, this is called the Pacific Ring of Fire, which has like, earthquakes at the entire outline of this area, right? Pacific Ocean. But yeah, that's another key insight that I can call out from this one. And then if I go on to the next one, then I'm talking about, a more specific cut to the data. So this is how a dashboard should also be, right? In your eventual dashboard, you start with the KPIs, which are the high level numbers, the top level numbers. Then you go to the next level of detail. Then you go to the next level of detail, and then you focus on at the individual level, right? So that's always how your story should also be. It should go from a high level of detail to a very low level of detail. Now you are talking about only those 16 earthquakes which are at a magnitude of above 8. These are very deadly ones, right? And it talks, there's this area here which you can use to write a description. So caption is like a title of the slide, description is like a description of this slide or this view. And it talks about, the mega quakes, right? These are the ones that have drawn a lot of attention, caused significant damage and loss of life, right? And then you again close in on one that is the Indian Ocean earthquake and the tsunami of 2004, right, which had a 9.1 magnitude. I'm sure all of you remember this incident, right? And how much damage it caused. So this is talking about the magnitude of that particular tsunami or that earthquake, which resulted in, that undersea mega thrust earthquake, the third largest, right? And then comes the tsunami of 2011, which was the Japanese earthquake near the coast of Honshu in Japan, right? 9 magnitude. And this is where you are going into the specifics of those ones. Now, here you have a trend line which shows you, what's this. There's a steady increase in the number of earthquakes, right? Which is actually not good news, right? The tectonic plates shifting is like, the reasons behind earthquakes, it's happening more to actually trigger more during all of these years. And then finally, you can see that especially on the side of the Pacific Rim is where the earthquakes are more. So you notice that Pacific Ring of Fire, which I spoke about earlier, and here is a split of which are the regions that have like a higher one, and you can see APAC or Asia Pacific is where most of them are concentrated. But when you look at EMEA is Europe, Middle East, and Africa. That's where the least amount of earthquakes have occurred. And then you have North and South America also, which is in the middle, right? So you have these lines in the center, which are the trend lines, which is giving you a one line that's like showing the direction of all of this, right? Um, and finally, it's also talking about the trend in the big quakes, right? The ones that have a magnitude of higher values. These are not very clear trends. It's not showing that that number is steadily increasing. When you look at this trend, it's like increasing at a very high pace. The slope is high. But here, when you look at only the ones that are with larger magnitude, you're not seeing that high a trend, which is a good thing, right? But you get the idea. These are the insights. These are the power points of your presentation, right? That's going to drive impact. That's going to drive people's attention to these points, because eventually, you as an analyst should be the one who should drive people's attention to a data point which is telling you that something's really wrong. You need to take action about it, or you need to at least start noticing it, right? So I'm going to exit the presentation mode, and I'm going to quickly show you some basic steps that you can do to create your own story. So let me try going back. Hold on, I think I need to exit the presentation mode because the clicks are not working. Okay. I hope this works now. I think my Tableau has kind of gone into a hung state. So let me give it a few minutes. What I can do, Linda, in the meanwhile, is take a few questions, right, while I wait for this to resume. So let me, yeah, let's take the questions now, and I can, in the meanwhile, try and see if I can resume with the Tableau examples.
Sure, sir. So can I start reading it out?
Yes, please.
Okay. So the first one, which is the best visualization tool that can be used?
Yeah, that's a good question. Now, there is no best visualization tool, but there are a few that have been like market leaders, right? Now, if you look at Gartner's Magic Quadrant, there's something called as Gartner's Magic Quadrant. You can Google that. Gartner always publishes every year which are the leaders in the visualization tool space, right? Now, as per the latest reports in 2020, I think they haven't released one for 2021 yet, if I'm not wrong. The ones in 2020 say that Power BI is the leader in the space, right? My personal favorite, however, is Tableau because of the visualization capabilities. But when you look at Power BI, it also has a lot of data transformation capabilities. Tableau does that through a separate tool called as Tableau Prep, which does all of the cleaning and preparation, and which is also a really amazing tool. But within Tableau Desktop, you don't have a lot of data cleaning options. So that's one key difference. Power BI still has some basic transformation options and everything. It has natural language processing, and you have a lot of integration with inbuilt integrations with R and Python scripts and things like that. Some of those factors, differentiating it and making it like a superior one compared to Tableau in the Gartner's quadrant. But to be honest, every tool has its own advantages and disadvantages. Now, I'll say Tableau, Power BI, ClickSense, right? ClickSense. These three are like the leaders right now, right? There's also Looker. Some mention worthy names would be Looker. Google Data Studio is a free dashboarding tool from Google, which is completely web-based. You don't have to install a software. You just need to go to a web URL and you use your Google account to start creating your dashboards in Google Data Studio. There's Domo. Domo is another visualizing tool. There's a lot more actually, right? ClickSense had an older version like ClickView. They had Click has two of these, Click View and ClickSense, but ClickSense is the more advanced one. But yeah, these are some good examples. My personal favorite is Tableau, but I have used Power BI also, and Power BI has also really great capabilities, especially the amount of custom visuals that Power BI provides. That's one reason that makes it stand out. But yeah, I would diplomatically answer that question to say that there's no best tool really. For people with different needs, there's a different tool that works better for them. Like for example, if all of your data is on Google Analytics or Google BigQuery, if you're using Google BigQuery to store all your data, then I would recommend use Google Data Studio. Because why? Google plus Google will always have like a better native integration than when you try to bring that data into your Microsoft suite, which is Power BI, or into your Salesforce suite, which is Tableau, right? So always try to look at other factors also, which could be, what is your data sources? How much money do you have, right? Your budget is a big factor, because Google Data Studio is something that you can use for free. Power BI is less costly as compared to a Tableau. Tableau licenses are usually costlier. It's almost, I think, $70 per user per month, if I'm not wrong, the last time I checked. But yeah, there are several factors of consideration before you choose which dashboarding tool. But if you're looking at it from a perspective of, I'm somebody new in this industry, I want to learn a tool just so that I get better prospects or opportunities, then focus on, Tableau and Power BI first, because these are the ones that have like a good market share and volume. Yeah.
So the next one, when you
Mhm.
submit a storytelling dashboard to your audience, is it preferred to submit a written report along with it?
A very good question. Now, it depends on the scenario. Now, I really love that question, because, that's a very thoughtful question. There are different ways in which your storytelling or your dashboard is getting presented, right? Sometimes you are expected to present it in the form of like a presentation like this, right? You're expected to join a Zoom call or a Google Meet call, and then you are expected to present your findings in front of people, right? That is like a, I'd say, take that opportunity to actually grab their attention, and derive some insights that's going to really going to make them feel that, okay, this guy is driving value from this entire dashboard, right? Um, uh, that's one way you're presenting it. In case you're presenting it like that, then I would use something like, the story feature here, which has some of these catchy captions. Like that's like a, I wouldn't call it a written report which is detailed. This is more like a summary or a concise version of it, right? When you're using a slideshow, and if you are using presentation or PowerPoint, you're adding those images and visuals, try to keep the text minimal. Okay, always remember this. The key insights only you need to highlight, and I use this as a principle for myself in my analytics presentations. I always add the key insight as the title of my slide. Okay, and this is something I got to learn from a lot of experts in the industry also, right? I would also recommend that you keep the key insight as the title of your slide, because that way you're reducing the amount of text. Don't keep a lot of bullet points on your slide. That's going to kill your presentation. The moment people are starting to read what's on your slide and stop listening to you, that's when you lose it. You're losing that presentation as a speaker, right? You're losing your audience because they start reading it on their own, right? Don't let people do that. Always let you narrate the story when you're presenting it. But in 80 percentage of the use cases, roughly 80 percentage, you are not expected to present it to them on a live session. You are expected to send it to them in the form of an email along with snapshots, or just publish and give them access to it, right? So what I usually do in those cases is, when I write up the email which says, here's the dashboard that you asked for, this is the link to access that dashboard. Probably you would have published that dashboard to a server or online, right? And then you'll have a link that you can share with people. And I'd say that all the requirements are met in this dashboard, so on so. And then I list down 5 to 6 points which are talking about some of the key insights from that dashboard, right? So this is something you always need to look at when you are an analyst in your initial few days. When you create a report or a dashboard, spend, after creating it, which takes probably a week or 2 weeks, after that spend additional 1 to 2 days, or a few hours at least, just to analyze that data, understand it, and then share a few insights, right, with the end stakeholder. That's going to give you a lot of more appreciation. People are going to value your work, and it's going to give you more prospects in your career also, right? Because that's when you start getting noticed from the crowd. And that's when those insights, because people who request dashboards, they don't have a lot of time to go through it themselves. If an analyst is going through it and finding the key insights and showing it to them, nothing like it, right? So to answer your question, should I write a report in along with every dashboard? Do not write like a 2 to 3 pager report. Summarize, keep it into like 5 or 6 bullet points, because nobody has time to go through a lot of detail and 3 to 4 pages. But if you're giving them 5 to 6 bullet points, that can still do the trick. So that's how I would answer that question.
So the next one,
Yeah.
what software would you recommend for data analysts and how to learn and apply effectively?
Good question. So, I've seen a lot of job descriptions, and I've, written a few job descriptions myself when I'm hiring for my organization, right? Some of the skill sets that is expected in every data, almost every data analyst, is, Excel and SQL, right? Excel is a good tool to learn, definitely a must. It's still not outdated, and I don't think it's going to be outdated for a long time, right? So Excel is a good skill to learn. SQL is a good skill to learn. Tableau and Power BI, especially if you're interested in data visualization, these are good skill sets to learn. I would suggest also to have, at least one ETL or a data transformation tool like Tableau Prep. I don't think Tableau Prep is that common compared to tools like Alteryx, or there are also other tools like, SQL Server integration services, right? A lot of them. I mean, the amount of tools that you have in the space is not, minimum. It's a lot of them actually, but these are some of the common names. If you want to actually, focus on something like a data scientist or a machine learning or an AI kind of a, job role, if you want to go towards coding, if you're interested in coding yourself, then I'd recommend you also learn R and Python, right? These are also, Python being the one that's like, extensively used. There are a lot of use cases, like, even in web development, in machine learning, in, advanced use cases, or in advanced data science use cases. So yeah, these are some of the tools I'd recommend. And how you want to learn it, right? I think that was also a question. How to learn it? There's obviously, if you are into data science, there's Kaggle. Kaggle has a lot of, competitions, and you can also take part in a lot of exercises there. Collaborate with people. For Tableau, you have something called as Makeover Monday. Just search for Makeover Monday in social media platforms like LinkedIn or Twitter. These are hashtags, and you will find a lot of people publishing dashboards with Makeover Monday data sets. So every week there's a dashboard that gets, there's a data set that gets published, and you're expected to create a visualization from that, data set, and publish it using the hashtag Makeover Monday on LinkedIn or Twitter, right? So that's where you can use it. These are a couple of areas where you can use it. Try to get hands-on projects. Try to get internships if you are starting out, right? If you are still studying, try to get an internship where you can get some hands-on. Try to join those hands-on workshops. I used to do certain Tableau workshops myself, but those have been kind of put on hold for right now. But there are many of these, workshops, and I'm sure if you follow Excel in Excel, you'll get a lot of opportunities there as well, right? Yeah.
So can I read out the next one?
Sure, please.
What is a visualization which can be used to ERP like SAP or Oracle? What are the prospective native connectors which are available for ERPs?
I haven't worked directly with ERP data sources myself. Now, it's very easy to find out if there's a particular ERP or a SAP system that you're using, right? Software that you're using. You just need to find out, which are the data sources that data tools that you can connect to using that. For example, if I were to search for Tableau data, so data native data connectors, I can search on the internet and I can find it very easily that these are the set of sources that I can connect to with Tableau. And similarly for Power BI, and similarly for otherwise, there's a lot of resources available on the internet to see which sources you can connect to using which. And obviously, when there are no native default connectors, then it's a matter of creating those APIs, and it becomes a bit more complex. Then you need more technical acumen to create that integration yourself. But people have done that also. So always try to find if somebody has already solved that problem before, and that is going to make it easier for you to understand if that's going to be possible or not. But yeah, that's how I would answer that.
Thank you, sir. And there are a couple of SQL. Which one should someone start with at home?
A couple of SQL in a sense. I think, are you referring to different versions, or I'm not really sure about that question. But just search for basic SQL. I think there are basic uh, you know sites like mode.com. There are other sites like V3 School, right? These are certain websites that will give you SQL tutorials. So try to start with the basics. Do not go for a lot of advanced ones. Just try and understand how a basic select query works. Data definition language in terms of if you want to create or modify some of the content within your SQL databases. Try to learn some of the basics there again. Start from scratch. Scratch a few lines above the surface, and then once you start doing more practice exercises, you will get more exposure, right? But yeah, these are some places or some websites where you can start with a few. Try mode.com, mode.com. That has like a good set of SQL tutorials.
Okay. The next one, sir. Between
Mhm.
G- between GUI based analytical tools like Alteryx and coding based R or Python, which one would you prefer if money isn't into consideration?
Very good question again. It depends on the use cases. So if you have a GUI based tool like Tableau here, right? Tableau is a GUI based tool. It has a graphical user interface. You don't need to code. You just need to drag and drop. But in terms of the amount of visualization possibilities, Tableau is much, much better than your Python, right? Because in Python, the visual appeal of your dashboards may not be that good. The amount of customization that you can create, it takes a lot more coding to do that. It's possible eventually, but it's going to take a lot more lines of code and scripts to be written, which makes it more and more complex with every new use case that comes up, right? So I wouldn't recommend, especially when your focus is data visualization, try to use the ones with the GUI, like Tableau or Power BI or even Alteryx, which has some visualization capabilities. But when your use case is something like, you want to do predictive modeling, you want to do some kind of cognitive analytics, where you want to have like a prescription system, or something that's telling you a possible churn rate of customers and things like that. If you want to do advanced analysis, then in those use cases, try to use your R and Python, because tools like Tableau, the amount of custom forecasting and prediction and things like that Tableau can do is very limited. So it depends on the use case. If money is not a consideration, you should then look at what are the questions I'm trying to answer. Am I trying to create a summary of the data that I already have? If I don't need to create any predictions or modeling or algorithms around it, then I can just use visualization tools like Tableau and Power BI to do it, because it's going to give me uh, you know get that done with less effort. But when you want to do more advanced use cases, then obviously you need to use tools like R and Python.
Thank you, sir.
Yep. Mhm.
And what are the techniques you would recommend to make the utilization of big data more efficient, especially when using applications like Excel?
Could you repeat that question?
What are the techniques you would recommend to make the utilization of big data more efficient, especially when using applications like Excel?
Okay, thank you for repeating that. I was just trying to gather my thoughts as well. So when you talk about big data, now big data is a very overused or an abused term also in certain cases. Big data doesn't really specify that this is the range in terms of GB or TB when you are calling something as big data. Now, I would say something that's you're not able to process very easily using just your human intelligence, that could be something called as big data, right? Data could have, there are three V's that define how complex data can be. One is the volume. The amount, just the amount of rows that a data has can tell you the volume of it, right? The amount of cells in an Excel sheet is telling you the volume. Then there's something called as variety. If your data is more varied, then it increases the complexity. And the third thing is the velocity, right? And there are more V's to it. These are just the basic V's. The velocity is the speed at which more and more data gets generated, right? When it's a very large business, there are trillions and trillions of terabytes and petabytes of data that gets generated, every now and then, or within a year, or within a few years. But when you're looking at a smaller business, then it's just in a few MBs and GBs. But eventually, what I'm trying to say here is, when the amount of data is too large for you to process manually, when you're using a tool like Excel, something, obviously it's a very basic feature in Excel that helps me is obviously the filters in Excel, right? So when I use filters and filter out values that are not relevant to me, that helps me look at a shorter version of data and then understand it. The second thing I would use is obviously sorting. I can use the sort feature in Excel to sort by a particular field or a set of values, and see which are only the top few ones that I want to see, right? I can use conditional formatting in Excel. So conditional formatting is a way to look at only the elements that are, green in color, or, based on a certain set of criteria that you define, right? So that is another feature that I would use. Pivot table is obviously one of my favorites. When you use pivot tables, you are able to summarize or aggregate that bigger data into, you're able to aggregate it into, groups, like for example, by state or by region or by district, right? You're able to see that summarized view in a pivot table. Whenever I'm working with, aggregated data, I mean, very large data sets, and if I want to answer specific questions, and if I'm calling it big data because that's too much data to handle, then I'd use a feature like pivot table to only look at the columns that I want to look at, which I can check mark in the field list, and then look at an aggregated sum of values and then understand it better. So these are some of the basic features. I'm sure there are more features in Excel which will answer your question, but these are some of the very basics that come to my mind immediately when I think about it. Do we have any other questions?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Do you
Just
know?
to, yeah, sorry, Alinda. Just to get a
Yes.
sense, how many more questions do we have right now? I'm just looking at the time also.
Just one more, sir. That will
Okay,
do.
yeah, yeah,
Yes.
okay. Mhm.
Do you know or do you recommend a platform to do SQL projects? Something similar to Kaggle or GitHub for Python or R projects?
Good question. I haven't used any so far. Unfortunately, I'm not aware of any. But did you try doing a Google search? I mean, Quora is a good place where I usually find these kind of insights, right? People always use community forums to discuss things like this, like, Stack Overflow, Quora, Reddit. These are places where people usually answer these kind of questions. But I'd recommend you to just use the right keywords for a Google search. You'll be able to find places where you can do. I mean, there are umpteen resources available online. It's just a matter of us looking for it, right? So not for SQL, I am not familiar with any, but feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn also. I've put my LinkedIn handle over here. Feel free to connect. I may be able to find something for you, right? Should be possible. But right now I don't have any recommendations there because I haven't done it myself, but I'm sure it should be easy to find.
So I think with this we can end the question and answer session. And
Okay, great.
for some more questions, you can personally go and give in your answers. So
Sure, absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, like I said, feel free to reach out. I'm there on LinkedIn. You just need to search by my name, you'll be able to find me, most probability. But coming back to my Tableau screen, is my Tableau screen visible, Erlinda? Can you confirm?
yes, sir, we can see that.
Okay, great. I think it has started resuming. Yeah, it's now working, right? So I can quickly show you some of the things that you can do. So in Tableau, if you're familiar with it, there's the option to create a new worksheet, new dashboard, and a new story. 99 percentage, probably 95 percentage of the people don't use this feature at all, but it's a very useful feature, and I'm going to show you how. So I just added a story sheet, and I'm going to rename this as, my earthquake story, right? Right. And I have these visuals here, which I was using in the example when I was showing you guys earlier, right? I have this map dashboard. Let me wait for this to refresh. But yeah, you can see there's this map dashboard, there's this timeline dashboard, and there's this timeline by region dashboard, which is split by each of the regions, right? Now, if I want to create the same story that we were showing earlier, how I can do it is, I can double click on the map dashboard, which will bring it onto this, pane here. So double click is a simple way to get your things onto a dashboard, right? Now I can see that there's a lot of scrolling that I have to do, a vertical scroll and a horizontal scroll. One way to kind of adjust that scrolling is going to the map dashboard. In the dashboard pane, I have this size options here, and in the size options under fixed size, I have an option to fit to the story. So earthquake story is the story that I created just now. I want to fit it to that earthquake story. And now let me go back and wait for this to refresh. I can see that, it's now fitting here perfectly. I don't see the scroll bars, right? Which is a good thing, because, try to avoid scroll bars as much as you can. So when I go to the present mode for this one now, I'm not seeing any scroll bars here, right? I don't have to scroll. I'm seeing everything in a single view. Let me go back. Okay, now by default, the title of the story point or the story is the name of the sheet. Okay. Okay. When I change this to story one, I can see the title also gets changed to story one, right? I'm going to undo that change now. And the way to override this is double click on this title, and then you can see that it's set to pull the dynamic value of whatever the sheet name is. Now I'm going to override that with something called as, the story about earthquakes. So it's something random I came up with just now, but obviously keep your title something that's more relevant. And if there's a key insight, obviously you can also add that key insight as a story headline. But here, since you have like a place for a description, I can add my key insight in my description. Now, maybe I'll add something like, a representation of all the earthquakes so far, small and big ones, right? Both the small and big ones, right? And then I can also add a caption, which is like the name of my slide within the slideshow. So I can add a caption to say all earthquakes, something as simple as that, right? Now, the next thing to do is I can add a new story point. I can add either a blank one, or I can add I can duplicate the existing one. So I'm going to duplicate the existing one. And let's see how that goes. You can see that now I have two story points here. I have the first one and I have the second one. In the second one, I want to look at the ones that are having the magnitude of more than 7. Right? I have to slide this to exact 7, but if it becomes tricky, I can just, go ahead and enter that here manually. And now I'm able to see the Pacific Ring of Fire, the one that we were talking about earlier, right? So now I can go in and change the description also to say the Pacific Ring of Fire, right? And I can even change this caption here, or this slide title here, to say something like the larger ones. Right. So you get the idea. I'm able to duplicate this even further, and I'm able to look at, just the ones that have a magnitude of 8 to 9, something above 8. These are the super huge ones, right? Let me just change this manually to 8, right? And now I can see, only the large ones, and these are all, above 8. These are the killer ones, right? You see a lot of them concentrated here. This is South America. And a few over here in Mexico, right? There were a few in Mexico. But yeah, you get the point. These are the ones that are like a high magnitude, the 16 deadly killer earthquakes, right? And I can even say, the deadlier ones. and I can say something like, uh, more than 8.0 magnitude. See, I'm keeping it very simple right now. It's better to have some more data points here. Like, if you look at the story, all of these stories have like more data points and some more insights. Obviously, if I drill down further into this information, I'm able to create those insights and I can actually add those insights, right? But yeah, this is how you create, and I can duplicate this again. And now if I want to change it to, somewhere where the super deadly ones, I want to look at only those ones, then I can have those ones, right? Something more than 8.9, there's just two of them. And let me try and change this setting. Okay, hold on, I think it's visible, but it's not visible here. Yeah, you can see there's one here in Sumatra, there's one here in Japan. And when you scroll, use your scroll in the mouse within a dashboard, it zooms in. You can always change that by removing the pin, and it will always go to the default mode. Yeah, but these are some tips. I think we are running out of time. We're at 7:30 p.m., which is officially the close. So these are some tips to get your storyline started. When you're using a Tableau desktop to narrate your story, preferably try to use the story feature. And these are some basic steps to get started. Um, yep, that's pretty much it. Thank you guys. And any do we have any more questions, or are we good to wind up, Arinda?
So we're good to wind up, sir.
Okay, perfect. Thank you everyone for joining in. I hope you had some good takeaways from the session and hope to stay connected. Happy weekend.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. That was indeed an informative session. And on behalf of Excel and Excel, I thank you for sharing your wisdom. And
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure. Yeah, no problem.
thank you, sir. And I would also like to thank all the participants for your time and support. So, would you like to tell us about yourself, like your
Yeah,
journey?
yeah. About my journey, I'm somebody who did not choose to be specifically in analytics. When I joined my MBA and when I looked at a few job opportunities that came via my placements, there was this one job description that really struck me differently because it was, a not a typical one, like a sales or a customer relation or, something like a financial role. But this was more of, senior data analyst kind of a role, right? Which was different. At that time, I wasn't aware of the analytics space or industry, but then, that really piqued my interest because I had a thing for numbers and mathematics. And that's one of the reasons that actually helped me crack the interview also, because I'm good at aptitude questions and stuff like that, right? But ever since I've been in this industry, there's no regret. I've been, presented with great opportunities. The industry is growing very, very quickly. You can see that by the number of data science courses that are coming up, every now and then, right, with every other organization. But my journey has been in a way that, I never chose this, the industry chose me. But what I'd like to kind of end this session on one thought is, if you aren't part of this industry already, it is definitely possible to become a part of this. All you need to do is, one, try to learn the right skill sets, and learning by doing is the best way of learning. So always try to get hands-on exposure, try to participate in events, competitions, sessions like these, and also get your hands on. Try to network with more people, because I've always figured this out, that talking to people is always the best way to enter an organization or enter an industry. So talking to people is always good. I am a networker myself. I try to attend sessions and stay back at the end just to talk to the people that are present there, right? That has opened up a lot of doors for me. So I'd recommend the same to all of you as well. That's my my humble journey so far. I've listened. I've gone to attend seminars and events like these, and at the end of the seminar, I stayed back to tell the people that I'm interested in conducting a seminar just like these. And because of that, I've been I'm now on the other side, delivering talks and sessions. And it's just a matter of time before each one of you can also try and take up the stage, and with whatever less that you're still able to help out your fellow community. So always do not hesitate to give back to people. That's obviously going to give you a lot more. You just need to wait for time to make that happen. But yeah, that's my humble story. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That was a very beautiful thought. Thank you. Thank you again for being here with us.
Sure, no problem, you're welcome.
Okay, so now over to some announcements. Okay, an announcement for all regarding our upcoming courses. We have a course on Microsoft Excel Essentials, which is a 3-hour course starting from 23rd Jan. Okay, so the course starts from 27 Jan. And we also have a course on robotic process automation, a 14-hour course starting from 27 Jan, and a course on data transformation and data automation using Power Query starting from 1st Feb. Interested participants can register from the link displayed on the screen. An announcement regarding our upcoming Fresh Talks. On 29 Jan, we have a session on the heart of DA functions and DA types by Abiola David. And on 13th Feb, we have a session on data transformation using Power Query by Indira Bhandari and Medha Bhandari. And on 19th Feb, we have a session on MS Excel tips and tricks a pro must use by Bob Umlas. Thanks again for joining us today, and we will see you in our next session. Do not forget to like the video, and for more updates, subscribe to our channel. To know more on EIE Fresh Talk, use the link in the description box. Stay tuned for more Fresh Talk. Have a happy weekend, and thank you all.